Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second of the Bridge dinner conversations that we're doing during the digital pre-COP conference Get Ready for COP26. My name is Jonas Klevhag. I'm a moderator and collaboration facilitator at the Bridge, and I'm very honored to host this transcontinental dinner today. Get Ready for COP26 is arranged by the Bridge in collaboration with many companies, cities, and organizations to highlight the good examples of what's being done to contribute in fulfilling the Paris Agreement, and to give the public a status report of how it's going that can be brought back to discussions at the breakfast tables at home, hopefully. We've previously done these Bridge Future dinners as live events, where we've invited some 20-odd people with diverse backgrounds and to a three-course meal. And for each meal or each course, we've introduced that conversation with a provocation, a short 2-minute provocation that then allowed the guests to sit down with whom they would like to discuss it with and have a casual conversation around it. So it's not where you would typically expect in these cases a presentation, a long presentation, and then a discussion that you see where you seek some sort of consensus. It's slightly different. It's merely a provocation to lead to a conversation. That's how we would like to do these dinners. And so doing this digitally has allowed us, obviously, to invite guests from afar, as today. And we've also, therefore, adapted the format to cut the dinner into 3 courses, 3 episodes, and inviting different people for each course. Yesterday, we discussed the question, how do we get more people or players to do more for the climate? That was the starter episode. And the takeaways there I would say were that the guests suggested that we need lower thresholds to engage, and we also need stronger stories that can bring people together for the long run. Those were the main takeaways. Today, however, we're gathering around the main question: how do we keep up the spirit? We certainly need a lot of motivation to be in it for the long run here. And for this part of the dinner, I'm joined by 4 guests. And to warm them up for future thinking, I've asked them to be a bit more concrete about the end of 2030, because that's sort of still on the horizon. Today, I would like to welcome Zitouni Uldada, a long-time civil servant to the British government, and currently the Deputy Director of the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization, the FAO, with the special responsibility for climate and biodiversity. You're the introductory speaker as well at the conference for the track of food, and you're also on 2 of the panels, I believe. How would you picture yourself, Zitouni, spending New Year's Eve on 2030?
Well, by then I can imagine myself sitting in the garden, drinking low-carbon tea, made in the kitchen, obviously, with the electricity supply from my solar panels. I have 16 solar panels on the roof, and I will be looking into the garden and thinking about the greenness that I always enjoy. That would be the moment what I will look back into what I've achieved. All the things I care about, I try to mirror them in the garden. So I have a compost, where we put all the food we don't want, and when you mow the lawn and everything, and then you reuse that back in the garden, and then you sow things, you prune plants, and you see the magic coming out. It's very rewarding.
It sounds like a very rewarding New Year's Eve after 10 years of hard work from now, or 9 years.
It is, hopefully, yeah. And I think at that level, at the house level, because it's personal, you feel, I did all these things. Now I have also water butts that collect rainwater, and I use that to water the plants. And what I imagine seeing in 2030 also is, at the moment I have a hybrid car, but I would like to be able to have the batteries in the garage so that I can have an electric car by then, and be as carbon neutral and as green as possible. And
so you're looking to spend a carbon neutral New Year's Eve on 2030.
That's right. Carbon neutral 2030.
Sounds very promising and rewarding. Thank you, and thank you for joining us. Moving across the Atlantic. So you're joining us from London today, and we're also joined by Annika Rembe, the Consul General of Sweden in New York, with a long history of promoting trust and interest in Sweden abroad. She's now promoting our brand with a big apple as a springboard. And you're part of a concluding session during the conference with international benchmarking. Annika, warm welcome. And how would you expect to spend New Year's Eve of 2030?
Well, thank you for having me on this dinner. It's delightful. I think New Year's Eve, I hope, will be like most New Year's Eve, spent together with friends and family, and where we probably, I think, we'll eat some new delicious insects or other new things that we don't really know of today. Probably not the weed soup because it's winter, but we will see what we will have. Maybe we will also drink some Swedish wine. I'm not sure it will be delicious yet by then, but we will have it sooner or later. That apart, I think we will probably use the time, as we often do, to reflect on what has happened the last year, and probably even the decade.
And would you say, would you expect it to be happy reflections?
I think it will be, although I have no clue what will be included, because there is so much happening. So it's really hard today. It's less than a decade away, but it's still hard to envision all of the awesome new things that might have happened, because I think we will have new solutions, new technology, new values, maybe new mindsets coming up, and that will influence what we've seen over the last 10 years, and also what we'll bring forward when we're looking into the next coming decade. So I really have no idea what we will be talking about, but I think it will be hopeful, but also with a sense of seriousness that it's not over and we will have to keep on working.
Okay, so you'll actually be looking forward, not so much backwards from that, in that moment. Fantastic. Thank you very much for joining us from New York this lovely morning in New York, I'm assuming. It looks sunny and nice. Yeah. Mattias Frymery, you're the head of the Swedish delegation to the UNFCCC, the COP, basically, where your main focus will be to help other countries make use of Swedish solutions to increase their commitments for the Paris Agreement, I'm told. And you're both the opening and closing speaker of the conference, but what's your general mood on New Year's Eve 2030, would you think?
Well, thanks for having me in this conversation. And sort of my general mood, I think, in 2030 is going to be upbeat. I think very much along the lines of what Annika was saying as well, that we'll be looking proudly at the achievements which we've been managing for the past decade, but also looking forward to the coming achievements, which we will need to be progressing on, sort of finding and innovating new technologies, new solutions, and also putting sort of pressure on ourselves and each other to make sure that we continue delivering on the commitments which we made in the past years, and sort of continuing to making sure that the Paris Agreement remains the bedrock of international climate action.
So it's not over. It's the start of something new after 2030. We had actually. Yes. One participant one guest yesterday said revealed to us that it's not over by 2030. There will be things happening after that as well. And
another reflection I made is that, you know, it was 20 years ago that many of us were sort of engaged on New Year's Eve 20 years ago when we had the millennium bug. You know, I remember I was at my first posting and I was on duty to make sure, you know, when everything broke down, you know, we were going to be there to sort of to see how things were going to be patched up again. Nothing happened, as we recall, nothing much at least. But it's 20 years ago, and it feels like yesterday to me. So these 10 years are going to pass by fairly quickly, and there's a lot of work to be done. But there's a lot of work to be done also after 2030.
Right. So basically saying it'll hopefully be a cheerful but a New Year's Eve like any other, and then we pass on the ball from there. Thank you very much, Mattias, for joining us from Stockholm this morning, and also from Stockholm, Emma Morea Viking from Business Sweden. You're the head of international sustainable business at Business Sweden, and sort of forwarding the ball from where Mattias probably leaves it when he comes back from the COP. Sort of helping other countries implement Swedish solutions for the climate and other purposes, of course. What would your plans be for New Year 2030, you think?
Well, thank you first of all for being able to join this fantastic dinner. I imagine that I will have similar kind of food and drinks that Sutuni described that he will eat. And I also envision a carbon neutral New Year's Eve, of course. And what I most of all envision and hope is that there will be zero conversation about the pandemic and about the climate crisis. That will hopefully been solved by humanity by then. That's what I envision. And that sustainability will no longer either be in a topic on itself. That will be something that is integrated in everything that we are doing and everything that we are seeing. And I also hope that we realize that we haven't really compromised and sacrificed much for this transition. We are able to kind of combine low carbon emissions with high living standards, and we can still live a kind of a nice and great life, although we are going through a huge transition right now. So that's what I envision, and of course also hope there will be a lot of sustainable food and drink at the table with family and friends.
I like that perspective, the idea that these issues that we are talking about today are long gone by then. That's an optimistic view, and we're probably on to other challenges. And you, Mattias, also sort of hinted on that the millennium bug is long gone in our minds now. We're on to new things. Thank you, everyone, for joining. A warm welcome to you all. And to give us an idea of what we might have been eating if we were to meet for a real dinner, I asked our colleague, Sophie Granat, who actually is our own master chef from 3 years back, for some inspiration based on today's question: how do we keep up the spirit? And she thought a bit of it for a while, and then she said, well, I think to keep up the spirit, you mustn't be too hard on yourself. You probably shouldn't. We shouldn't exhaust ourselves by overthinking it too much. So she suggested we go for a happy plant-based meal where no rules apply, and making it a real treat for ourselves. So here we are. Imagine yourself standing in front of an abundant buffet of anama falafel, schnitzels, Frankfurt taco ingredients, along with barbecued spring vegetables, some oat rice, roasted garlic sauce, and fresh salad greens. And you're just about to dig in. You can just close your eyes and imagine yourself digging in. Unfortunately, you'll have to keep imagining it for this dinner. That's the kind of dinner we're at. And if you have allergy concerns, you're free to imagine adjusting for them as well in your mind. All right. So we know that the climate crisis requires the contributions of everyone, and we're willing to do the work. But it's still not easy when we get report after report saying that it's not good enough, or perhaps even going in the wrong direction. So that's why asked you to dwell on the question. I'll start with you, Annika, if you don't mind. What are your thoughts on how what are your tricks and what are your thoughts on staying in the game for the long haul?
It's a very good question, and I think we have to be honest. It's not always easy to keep up the spirit. And I think especially this year, where we in many ways, I think, can feel and sense that we have lost a year of focus on climate question, on all of this that we are discussing here, because we have had something which has been closer to us. It's been real to everyone. So with that in mind, I think we need to both reap the learning from the pandemic, see what can we actually take from that, with all the learnings of the quick actions, the joint efforts, but also the changed patterns. I mean, the fact that we're meeting like this and it actually works will mean that we will change so many things to the benefit of people. We will still need to be in real life, but we will certainly have new plans. But I think in many ways we live in a time of worries and hope. Worries that we will not be able to do enough in time, but also hope of seeing all the different actions that are ongoing. We live in a time of uncertainty, but also I think of trust. As I said previously, I don't know where all the solutions are, but I do have trust in the fact that we will find some of them. And this is quite unusual way for us as human beings, because we need, when it's more black or white, we want to have the clear answers, the straightforward path. And we are not very accustomed to it's both. It's not one or the other. But having said that, I think we also need to make sure that we need all action, all stakeholders. We need us to have hope and to bring, the individuals to do what we can do. We certainly need. We need the governments not only for policy making and not only for the big words, but for the funding of infrastructural projects, the funding of R&D, the nudging, pushing industry, funding of education and all of that. And there we also need the multilateral systems because many countries cannot have this funding on their own. We need the industry, obviously. The launch players taking on the green steel, which is bold. And we need the small ones trying to make solar cars in their garage, in their backyards. We need the investors, and there the jury still is out. I don't know really where the financial system is, honestly, but they're moving. We need the research and all the others. So I won't go. So we have to really find the new ways of collaboration and partnerships, but also knowing that we're not alone.
So you're talking about here many different time perspectives, really. The pandemic has given us a shorter time perspective in the sense of urgency that you think we can learn from to sort of keep up the spirit. Another one is, and then you talk about the longer perspective. It's also the policy levels. The governments need to invest and to invest in long-term research and technology. And you also talk about bringing many different stakeholders together so that we're all in it, basically. And that's another way I understand you mean that we can actually help each other keep up the spirit.
Yeah, and I think we have to understand both the speed and the exponentiality in the development. So things are really getting quicker and quicker. But we also have to understand we don't have to do everything on our own. Every nation, every country, every government does not have to be involved in everything. And as an individual, I don't have to take responsibility for everything. But it's the combined efforts, because otherwise I think it will be just too big and huge to encompass.
Mm-hmm. So learning that you don't have to do it on your own. We're all in it, and looking and taking the inspiration from externally. That is your recipe for keeping up the spirit, basically.
I have taken so much inspiration just from the initiatives of fossil-free Sweden, for instance. Just being 22 sectors, from the ski resorts to the steel manufacturers, are all trying to take initiatives to see how they could cut fossil fuels and turn Sweden into a fossil-free society. I mean, I think that it has given me a lot of inspiration, but I also get a lot of inspiration from my son-in-law who serves soup on the weeds that he's picking when he's working in garden. I mean, so it's all the initiatives. And I try to do my best here, really. We have a compost on the roof, I have to tell you. And we only serve vegetarian, and so on.
Right.
Good. Fantastic. So let yourself be inspired by others and inspire others by doing that as well. Yeah. It's a good way to keep up the spirit. Thank you very much for sharing that thought. Zituni, moving back to London here across the Atlantic, these are slow processes that we're dealing with. We say that we have a decade or less than a decade to reach our 2030 goals. How did you find and give motivation to keep working with such long time perspectives?
Well, I agree with Annika that inspiration is key. You need something to inspire you from time to time. It's like the fuel that you need to keep going. And it makes you more ambitious, and it gives you some kind of reassurance that you're going in the right direction. And I'll give you an example. At the moment, renewable energy is the cheapest fuel that we have. But if you look back 20 years ago or so, it was so expensive, and we never thought that we're going to reach this stage now where renewable energy is affordable by everyone. Anyone can have solar panels now and can use renewable energy. So that's very inspirational, and it helps you actually realize that it can be done. You have to plan, you have to have policies in place and have the right players together, but it can be done. And the other inspiration, in a sense, if you like, is that, or the positive side of the pandemic, is that we jumped so many steps, I would say, in becoming digital. You know, just last year, we never thought that everyone would be using digital means to communicate and to work. And it's incredible. We did it. So we jumped so many years now, and everyone is thinking digitally. And the other point I would say, actually, is I think there are many things that we have to think how they bring us together. As you said, Annika, you're right. And I think the pandemic has shown that a lot. Our world is so small. We think it's big, and actually it's small. We're so interconnected. And when things happen in one area, of course, they affect things everywhere. So we have to bear that in mind, always think, well, actually, we have to think about what we do and how it impacts on others, and what others are doing. Do they need our help? Do they need our support so it doesn't impact on us? Because that's how the world is interconnected. And the last point I would make is what will keep us going and what will help us actually always innovate and have these solutions is that you really have to care about what you're doing and you think of. If you're working on climate change and you don't care about climate change, then what's the point? You're not going to commit. You're not going to have that passion. And so you have to care about things truly to be able to say, okay, well, we need to do this. So when people also need your help and collaboration, because you care, you will do it. You see it for the general good, for the general benefit. And I think this is what we need to move into now. If we learned anything from this crisis we're going through, is that we lost so much. We lost our freedom, we lost our space, we lost our the thing that we enjoy, even going and sitting in a cafe now, you can't do it. Even some days, even if you wanted to go for a walk, now you're locked down, you can't even walk. You see what I mean? So we really have to readjust, I would say. So by being in this mode of thinking about everyone, inclusivity, I would say, and also caring about everyone before we care about ourselves, and then thinking, of course, things are possible and can happen at any time. Any time the change can trigger and can happen. And coming back to what you said about 2030.
Yes, indeed. It sounds like you're sort of triggered by the idea that the change could be around the next corner, could be happening anytime, basically. And I think that's a very curious approach to find motivation. That it's always worthwhile taking those extra steps to see what's around the next corner. Really inspiring. Yeah.
Yes, and I think something. Yeah, something facing us, I would say now, like artificial intelligence, which is picking up very fast. So you could imagine all kinds of scenarios with that, and what the future would be like.
Indeed. Well, thank you for sharing. And I'm sure you're sort of making notes, everyone, and we can have a round conversation afterwards. But I'm really curious to hear, Emma, what do you tell yourself, or those that you work with, that lost the spirit? What do you tell yourselves to keep up the good work?
Well, I think we need to acknowledge the progress that we actually have seen the past years. From a business perspective, we often talk about how sustainability and profitability goes hand in hand. And that is really the reality. And we see concrete examples of that every day. We see how governments are releasing new climate pledges. We see how companies are innovating amazing new innovations and ways to actually combat climate challenges. And I think the biggest problem is maybe the narrative. I think for us working with sustainability every day, we see what's going on. We see the fantastic solutions and innovations, the new materials that is made of orange peel and pineapple leaves that we can use as new materials for our clothes that we basically can then put in our compost. And I also see that we are in a history of making, an industrial history of making in terms of the whole industrial transformation. And Annika was also mentioning our initiative in Sweden to become fossil-free by 2045, our action plans to transform the whole transition. And those initiatives that we see there are mind-blowing, and it's really inspiring. And I think the problem is that for us working with it, we see it and we feel hopeful, and we feel, it's easy for us to keep up the spirit because we see the change. I think the problem is when people maybe not involved in this transition, and people who are demonstrating on the streets, they perhaps don't get the right information. And I think that's a media cover in general, that we're more likely to read negative, alarming news. However, it's more rarely that we read about the positive news. And I think that is what we really need to do in now moving forward to keep up the spirit. The companies need to find new ways to showcase and share their good ideas and their progress, and also find new innovative ways and understandable communication to then also share their transformation. so that it's more understandable that things are actually happening. And of course, there is still a lot of things that need to be done, but we do have innovations in place and a lot of new knowledge in place. We know what needs to be done. The only problem is that it's not fast enough. But I think I talk for many working within sustainability that we are hopeful, and we're keeping up the spirit thanks to all fantastic initiatives that are being presented every day, and that just needs to be shared among everyone in the population and the societies.
So you're saying basically that telling the stories of what we have achieved and what we are achieving actually is a very good way to, and it's an underused way to keep up the spirit. Tell the stories.
Exactly, and I mean we have a good kind of role model in Sweden. Before we had the author Hans Rosling, who could easily provide positive news about the progress of human development. And that is more the kind of information that we need within the climate debates and then how we should tackle the climate crisis. We need to have more specific and inspiring information on the progress. I think that would help a lot.
Yeah, indeed. He packaged facts and positive facts and encouraging facts in a very good way. Yeah, very, very good. Thank you, Emma, for sharing that. And last but not least, Matthias, how is it possible for you to renew the energy for each negotiation, for each COP, and for each work week?
For each day, for each hour.
How do you do? How do you go about it?
I think, as others have said, I think it should be stated that a lot of work remains to be done. You might have seen that. A couple of years ago, the UN climate panel, the IPCC, they released a report where they said that emissions need to be cut in half by 2030. And the UN Climate Secretariat, the UNFCCC, released a report of the commitments made so far this year and last year. They released a report a couple of weeks ago where it was clear that the commitments made will lead to a reduction of less than 1%. So there's a huge gap there which needs to be filled. And I think that's partly what motivates me as well, that there is a lot of work to be done, but also what was raised, that it can be done. And I think that's a story which we are bringing from Sweden, that it is a transition which is possible. And sharing the kind of the policy insights, how we have been structuring our transition so far and how we're moving forward is something which we're happy to share with colleagues and partners across the world to highlight possibilities in the transition. And obviously it's going to cost money. It's going to be, people are going to lose their jobs. There might be situations where, people will have to move because climate is impacting the environment already in such a way. There are droughts and floods and so forth, which might lead to those kind of situations where it's not even inhabitable in certain places. But all of that taken together, still, we're seeing these kind of positive developments which have been highlighted, both in terms of industry transition, the transition within the financial markets. We just have the summit which we're seeing now, which the US is organizing, with a lot of various kinds of announcements being made also in the financial sector. Various business actors are coming forward with these kind of solutions. So that really shows me and hopefully shows partners across the world that the transition is possible. And I think also what we're seeing, the engagement within civil society, and not least the youth movement, where they're pushing us constantly to be on our toes to make sure that we're delivering on the kind of promises that were made in the Paris Agreement and previously. And maybe just one last point also in the current context. The economic response to the economic crisis which the pandemic has caused has made a lot of governments make huge investments, which hopefully also can help us accelerate implementation of the Paris Agreement. I think I saw a figure from the IMF just the other day where they said $15,000 billion have been invested so far across the world. It's mainly through G20 countries. But still, there's a massive investments being made. And if we can sort of channel those to these kind of solutions, which have been highlighted already in our conversation, you know, everything from industry, transport, mobility, and so forth, energy efficiency, we can take these steps which we need to take also when it comes to implementing the Paris Agreement and the 2030 Agenda more generally. So that makes me hopeful.
Well, Matthias, it's not patronizing at all, but it seems like you made a Kinder egg out of Annika, Emma, and Zeitouneh's contributions and reflections here.
That sounds delicious.
Yes. You sort of took the viewing point of caring that Zeitouneh put out, and then also to not in it together that Annika put forward, and then told the stories that Emma was looking for, but told it to others during the negotiations and sort of found the energy and the spirit in helping others. Would that be a rough summary of what you were trying to convey there?
Well, if we can, I'd be happy to be part of that. Definitely.
Amazing. Any reflections from the rest of you? What did you get any inspiration from listening to your fellow guests here? Yes, Annika.
If I may, I think many good reflections, and I think if there is something that has happened over maybe the last 5 to 10 years or even shorter, it is that the realization that we can do things without actually, life does not have to be so bad. You know what I mean is that we can have this transition. We are cutting emissions. We can still have a GDP growth. Companies can still be profitable. And there is some hope in that, because it also means that it's easier to bring in many, many more stakeholders, individuals and companies and organizations and others into this. It is not as burdensome as many thought a decade ago. And I think that is something positive. With that, I'm not going to say that it's easy. I mean, there is hard work in this, and it is an important process. But when companies realize that no one would like to work for them, no one would like to buy their products, no one would like to invest in their companies, they will move forward because it's a necessity. It's a question of survival. When we as individuals understand that, yes, we can change our patterns, but it doesn't mean that we are not eating good, that we're not living a decent life. And at the same time, we can do this so that it's equal, not only in our society, but to the rest of the world, because that is the big question here. We have the opportunities to make the changes easier by the compost machines and all that, and the cars and all that. But we need to have a transition that is fair and equal. And we need to talk about it. And I think, Matthias, the fact that, yes, it will be some burdensome changes.
Indeed.
And you both would.
I think that was a good reminder that it is actually possible to look forward to a prosperous future and a sustainable one. It doesn't have to be more boring or less, but actually more life and more prosperity still, and without going outside of the boundaries that we are actually trying to learn about these days and learn more about every day. I have my takeaways here was basically that you're not on your own. That's a reassuring and spiritual thought. things can happen very fast. So you better stay in the game so you don't miss out on the changes that actually transform things in a fast way. Tell the stories in a compelling way. Tell the stories over and over again. Tell them many stories and tell them in a compelling way so that people actually can connect with them and care about them. And then make sure that these stories reach others and that you can help others, because in helping others, other countries, other cities, other places, other people, you will find a way to keep up the spirit. That's what I take away from this main course of the Bridge Dinner Conversations. I hope you enjoyed imagining the main course, the buffet that I talked about, the barbecue stuff and the roasted garlic cream sauce. Tomorrow, for the dessert, we've invited 3 guests to talk about the question, what do we tell our future generations? And we have Lena Ek, former Swedish Minister of Environment and now Chairman of Södra Skogsägarna. We have Matthias Goldman, Chief Sustainability Officer of Sweco, and Hannah Stanton. She's founder of thegolds.org and also a member of the Youth Council for the Swedish government. So that's for tomorrow. But today I would like to thank Annika, Zituni, Emma, and Matthias for joining us for this imaginary dinner, and look forward to seeing you at the conference again. Thank you, everyone who have listened in on this, for listening. See you tomorrow.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was delicious.